All right, arise and shine, people. I am channeling Annie today.
What?
It's another day of conquering Nigeria and all its hardship that it throws at us as people. My people, how the day?
I do not talk like that.
She does not
like that.
She does not talk like
She
that.
does, Tolu. Don't be on her side. She talks like she never ate eba in her life. And eba is good for your soul.
She's soft-spoken.
But was I not... Oh, please, can you bring my script back?
Please bring it back.
Please. How softer? No, rise and shine, people.
When they said embrace your femininity, they were talking about Annie.
Honestly. Annie, do you know, Annie would be facing some dire circumstances and she would still have her hands together.
And she will not raise her voice.
And she will not, she'll say, Lolo, I would appreciate if your voice is a little lower.
Yes. Meanwhile,
like
she
was shouting.
Yes. Yeah.
And I would not tolerate that, please.
Do you know, if
You say,
if Annie wants to sell material, I think anything you sell, people would buy.
Yeah.
You know why I use this cream? I use this cream because it makes you feel so good.
And if you touch your skin, it's soft.
I'm not lying. You have a way of. I'm serious.
Really?
Your believability.
I shall
say you are
never bring you near my husband. I tell you now. Before she says, oh, your friend. You know how your husband will meet some of your friends and be like, oh, she's so pretty. Her ways are so soft. She's so ladylike.
I say she's.
Then my fans be coming out to gorge out your eyes.
The rest of us are struggling with the ladylike part of things. How do you manage to stay ladylike? No, Annie, serious. This is off book. In Nigeria. How do you manage to stay ladylike?
With all the hardships that Nigeria threw at you, for the first time I see you using power bank.
No, you can't.
Stop. So I didn't charge. So I forgot to plug my phone in last night, and it didn't charge. So I woke up this morning. It was like 30%. Okay. So I had to bring my power bank.
Oh, wow.
Are you okay now? The next question.
Yeah.
What's the next question?
Yeah, how come you're so soft?
I think it's just the way that I am. I feel like the only time people win or like life wins is if it changes you. You have to determine who you are and just be that person. I'm very, very all about people being their authentic self. So if you're authentically like, go ahead, be like that. If you're more soft, just be yourself.
Please, how are you when you are angry?
When I'm angry.
Because
Does she even cook?
I cook. I love to cook. Are you kidding? I cook up a storm. That's
don't
one of my
you
favorite
people
things to
owe us
do.
an Airbnb cook Saturday? Did we
I've
not
been
discuss
talking
it?
about this in Airbnb so that everybody can cook different recipes.
Yeah, so we do like a
then we'll all
potluck in
pack
the
it and
house.
take home.
And then we have
Tolu
music,
cook,
and we've
I
got
will
good
cook.
wine. And
Okay, stop talking about it. The more we talk about it, the less it's going. But it's going to happen
has to
before the end of
happen.
this year.
Yeah,
I heard one thing she said. Wine, Abby.
good wine is always fine. I'll tell you
Yeah,
that.
Tolu, you agree on that, and Catherine is so happy. Only the floozy head is not.
Okay, please, let's come back. This is actually the beginning of Jasiri today. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, I don't know, ladies, did you guys see the picture of the Deputy Governor of Ebonyi State, Patricia Obila, where she was sharing 1,000 naira to commercial motorcyclists and physically challenged persons? Wait, see now, 1,000 naira.
President General amongst the nation.
Is that not the Bolton one itself?
That's the Bolton one. That's the original one. And I'm so angry that they used that beautiful classic on this show of
shame.
Because if I talk now, they'll say I'm going after the government. I'm trying to keep quiet.
Shame. Honestly, do you know that I actually wanted to cry? Because he feels so like you want to slap people.
It's demeaning.
Demeaning. What was she dressed as?
Wait, did you guys not have a sense of like an attitude?
Yeah,
when she came out of the car and she
I felt it was a skit.
No, yeah,
because she dressed like a character. Maybe she was channeling the governor, like, okay, go and act like the governor for a day. You know those children that they say sit in the place of the president for a day,
like
and they now wear,
Yeah.
and you're given 1,000 naira. 1,000 naira cannot even feed any of those people. Have you seen 500 naira rice lately? That is half of a spoon.
Like 500 naira rice?
If you're buying local rice from local women, they'll still sell, but it's a spoon.
You see, I will take the road less traveled.
Please go ahead.
Because, and I'm taking that because that is the reality of what we are facing. Look at the person who I'm assuming is her aide there, the guy clearing the road for them clearing the road.
Security detail.
The truth
As
is,
if these ones
we
can
don't
lynch her.
bring ourselves down to this level. Imagine that you're giving these bike men 1,000 and they say, no, it's okay. Even if...
I would love...
Perfect.
to see a video
say
of
no.
Nigerians rejecting
no,
this.
handouts. Because 1,000 naira, guys, will not do anything.
Anything. It's not even going to buy
talked
you...
about 500 naira rice outside. It can't change anything.
Are they going to buy 1 spoon of rice and 1 meat?
So you're giving that with attitude, Tolu. I saw the attitude.
That's what I said. Maybe it was a skit
If we
they're
start
shooting.
talking now, they will say we are not allowing our first lady to hear word. But I'm sorry, I believe that anointing flows from the head. It is the example that you have looked at and seen and observed that is allowed and permissible. That's what everybody's going to follow.
Yep.
So if we are going to wear Unity Ankara on the 1st of October, if that is the solution to our problems, then of course 1,000 naira is the solution to people who haven't seen food
Can I say
for months to
something?
eat.
Because I don't know if we're sitting on this
It's
table maybe
ridiculous.
feeling a bit elitist.
Yeah.
I know 1,000 naira cannot do anything.
Nothing.
But remember the other day we were talking about the cost of living in Nigeria, and it surprised a lot of us that Lagos is not
even the highest.
It's not the highest.
Yeah.
I think it was Bauchi that was the highest, and Lagos was number 8. I can't remember if Ebonyi was on
Lagos
that
was
list.
8.
It was.
But Ebonyi was on
Yes,
the
it
list.
was.
So while we can sit here and say 1,000 naira may not can do nothing for us, for them that 1,000 naira may be the day's meal.
Okay, so
And
here's my issue.
hold on, wait.
Okay.
But remember what I like to do? I like to separate issues.
Yes.
So 1,000 naira may be the day's meal, but as a deputy governor of a state, it is behoved on you to not be the person that insults people's dignity.
Thank you.
It behoves
that is
on
the
you.
real
That
issue
is
here.
the issue.
Yeah,
It is an insult.
It's so demeaning.
You see,
and guess what?
you say it's
Lola
an
already has a
insult.
problem with her outfit.
She dressed us.
The President General among the nation.
Honestly,
The people we say it's an insult. The people don't feel it's an insult.
No,
That is their hunger.
No, let me land. Because there's hunger. And there's there's hunger and there's hunger. There's a hunger that 1K cannot solve. And the moment we as a people start saying no to the mediocrity they're handing to us just to keep, somebody is thirsty, almost dying of water, of thirst, and you give them a drop of water, how does that help?
It doesn't.
It just increases their thirst.
So that's what I'm saying.
doesn't.
The moment we need, as a people, we need to stop it.
Yeah.
And say, no, I'm okay, even if I'm dying.
I'm dying. Yeah.
Because that 1K will not do anything.
It's demeaning. It's like she won.
The more we continue to accept this, the more this nonsense will continue.
And I'm going to bring another angle
You were
to
talking
it.
about, sorry to take
go
it
ahead.
off of you. You were talking about the Ankara fabric.
Yeah.
Listen, don't be surprised that states, the 36 states of
what are
the
you saying?
Federation,
Something that has been shared around already.
Yeah, the fabric.
and it will become a thing.
It'll become a thing.
It will become a thing.
Here's another issue I'm having.
Yeah.
You see the photo op that was done, the fact that you had cameras following her doing this rubbish. It engenders a sense of like helplessness in Nigerians. And this is one of the issues I'm having. It feels like this current government is intentionally trying to make Nigerians feel like they cannot help themselves. They cannot do anything for themselves.
must wait for handouts.
Yes,
You must wait for
you
handouts.
must wait for handouts, and you will take what we give you, no matter how small, insignificant, useless it is. You'll take it because that's all you're going to
And
do.
I always
so you
blame the
stop
handlers.
it.
I know a lot of
Yes.
people who say Lolo blames the handlers.
Who are the
I
people
always
that
blame the
these
handlers
things?
because there is no president that doesn't have a cabinet.
Yes.
There is no senator that does not have a team.
That doesn't
There is no
have
deputy governor
advisors.
that does not have people.
You will-
in her cabinet. So
all the
somebody sat with her
and
said,
approved
"Ma,
this.
please, let's dress you up as the governor. We will take his cap, we'll wear his babariga and his trouser.
No, maybe
then
that's
you
her
put your
style,
hand."
eh?
Did you see the air? And the security details were all over the place, as if somebody was trying to touch her.
Yeah.
Are they not? These people, are they not from the people?
They're from the people.
So why are they acting as if the people now
now
are the
contagious.
people that they are trying to defend themselves against?
The I better pass my neighbor mentality.
I
that
want to
Nigerians
bring in
have.
another angle.
Yeah.
We had a conversation yesterday with Dr. Joy Issa about education, the learning deficiencies that exist in Nigeria, numeracy, literacy, the lack of comprehension, the lack of critical thinking.
Inability to apply
I've had a
knowledge.
theory for a long time.
Yeah.
One, the state of Nigeria's education system is deliberate.
Deplorable.
It
and
is
deliberate.
deliberate
Yeah.
and deplorable.
Yeah.
Because as long as you can keep people uneducated, ignorant, lacking certain skills and lacking the ability to critically think for themselves, you can continue to
control them.
rule on them, to impose yourself on them. So that's one. My second thing is, do you guys know how much food is a critical part of education?
Yes.
Feeding helps children to assimilate and learn their. It keeps your synapses firing. It keeps your neurons. Your brain delivers. As long as we're in a situation where people in this country are going hungry, you cannot expect them to employ critical thinking skills and
Thank you very
comprehension.
much.
You
Thank you.
can't.
Yeah.
There's a direct correlation.
And it is intentional.
And then
That
they
is-
grow up
yeah.
to become adults who will be happy to collect 1,000
Handouts.
naira.
Yes.
I'm just
Because that's
sad
what they've been
because
conditioned to
there is-
believe.
The thing is, this is just something that is hurtful because it feels as if there is nobody that can speak
Say
against these
no.
people. If I was her
Lolo.
governor, if I was her governor,
Lolo,
I would definitely call her in for a meeting.
Lolo, you're
Lolo.
assuming that this is something that the governor, just because we don't have this video, maybe the governor has done something similar.
But here is my thing. You said the people that will say no, they're sitting right here on this table.
Yeah.
They're watching this show today.
Yeah.
The no is not going to come from some top of the mountain. It's going to come from the ground and swell up. If we are not ready to get into trouble for saying no, to be discounted for saying no, to be put on a blacklist for saying no, then nothing is going to happen. But the no has to come from us first.
I agree 100%.
It has to come from us, and it has to
Imagine
not
if all
back
those
down.
Okada men just took all that money and as she was about to go into Akade,
They threw it back.
That would be a thing to say.
We know, everybody knows that in this country, if there's someone said this to me, that everybody has a price, and that's one of the games that the people in government play. That they know if you're hungry enough,
You will
I
take
have
your
what I
price
need
will
and
be
buy
low.
you. Yes.
No, so I agree with the statement that everybody has a price, but what is the value of our
What's the
price?
value of our
So
price?
for us, they can come 1,000. My price is not
Not
1,000.
1,000.
Of course.
Our price is not 1,000.
Yeah.
My price is going to be give me electricity.
Yeah.
Give me at a
Yes.
reasonable rate.
Yeah.
Give me fuel at a
People go
reasonable
out
rate.
without getting
So
kidnapped.
it is easier for them to go to the people who they have impoverished to
low
keep
value
the
of their
price
prices.
low.
Yes.
Because that is how they continue to stay in government.
Yeah, it's strategy because
Absolutely.
the bulk of the electorate or the people that are going to vote for them
Are the
among
masses
the
under the poverty line.
under the poverty line, those
But
that cannot do
ladies,
much for
So,
themselves.
I mean,
What if we're overreacting?
No, please
well,
don't.
No, the reason I'm saying...
and the people of Ebonya outside there now in Ashwebi say, "Eshe o mama
The
wa,
reason-
all right.
aye akpe o."
Okay.
Others
So
just-
let's go on a break.
You know, the fish that they caught and
it's-
gave you, you will eat it and it will finish.
You-
the fish that you can get for yourself or catch for yourself, you
That
will
is-
never
And
run
that
out
one is
of.
always sweeter.
Thank you.
The one that you catch
never
for
run
yourself
out
You know
is
of.
that when
always
you
sweeter.
want to catch fish, it
So-
takes effort. Do they want to give the effort?
So
that's
on
another
that
question.
note, ladies and gentlemen, let's take a short break.
Please.
Return, our focus will be shifting to more pressing issues. How can we address the recurring failure in Nigeria's infrastructure projects? We'll be
What
right back.
the-
1,000 naira might do it, guys.
You're watching Jasiri on News Central. Join the conversation via our social media platforms. We are at News Central TV. Now, the recent flooding in Maiduguri led to the deaths of some 37 people, the displacement of over 400,000, while more than 1 million people were impacted. This was the third collapse of the dam, located just a few kilometers outside Maiduguri since 1994. Today, we turn our attention to a recurring challenge in Nigeria, the persistent failures of infrastructure projects. From roads to power plants and most recently the devastating flooding in Maiduguri, Nigeria's infrastructure gaps continue to affect millions of lives.
Did you know that there are more than 200 dams holding more than 31 billion cubic liters of water spread across Nigeria? Does anybody know that?
I didn't know.
That's a lot of water. In the case of the Alau Dam, it apparently was allocated 285 million naira in 2020, 80 million in 2021, and 37.5 million in 2023. I think about 30 million of that went in 2024. To help us unpack the challenges that we're facing and explore solutions, we are here with Mr. Emeka Obiwulu, founder and CEO of the Offshore Lab. Now, we're going to look at why infrastructure projects in Nigeria often fall short, what can be done to address these failures, and how modern technology and improved governance can create a future where infrastructure supports rather than hinders national progress. Mr. Obiwulu, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Very exciting. I know our conversation is a bit heavy because it's very broad. We're talking about failure of infrastructure, and that goes a long way everywhere. Let's start with the overview of the problem itself. From your perspective, what are the key reasons why infrastructure projects in Nigeria continue to face recurring failures? Because it has happened one too many times. And not just, this is a recent one and it's a big one, but we have had this failure in almost every facet of infrastructure development in Nigeria.
Indeed. Very good question, and thank you once again for having me. First, I want to extend my deepest sympathies to the people of Borno State, particularly to families who have lost loved ones, to 400,000, you say, 400,000 plus displaced people, over 1 million people impacted, lifestyles, livestock, hospitals, schools, all of these flooded. Having said that, there are some little bit of sprouts of progress. There was the immediate response, which I think deserves a bit of commendation, from NEMA, the Nigerian Armed Forces as well, actually relocating and setting up 9 IDP camps, providing the humanitarian relief, and we saw some progress as well with the human face shown by the president's etc. I think it's, for me, at this point, it's more than the immediate reaction. It's more than the response.
Absolutely.
It's a time for stock taking. When you talk about the cyclical nature of these failures, this is the point we actually sit down and ask ourselves, why? And how do we make sure we don't come back sitting down here again in 365 days and asking the same question, why have we lost lives? We're not just talking about property here. Why have we lost Nigerian lives? What can we do to prevent that from happening? What can we do? How can we plan for the future? And what happened and what we've seen at Alau Dam is not an isolated case at all.
3 collapses since 1994.
And this is you being specific about dams.
About this dam.
When you talk about the wider picture of
yes.
infrastructure projects like you started
Absolutely.
from, we have an endemic problem. We have systemic issues with our project delivery, right? And when you look at the data and they say to you that despite all of our infrastructure gap in Africa, you know, talking about Africa, Nigeria, talking about needing $3 trillion over the next 30 years to meet the infrastructure needs, it means that every dollar has to count.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
But when you also look at reports from UNDP, African Sustainability Reports, and they tell you that approximately 20% of the project is all that meets the needs that succeed, then you will see that we have a serious problem that we totally need to rethink how we deliver projects, right? And in a very summarized way, in a nutshell, the biggest problem we have is that we have a short-term approach to project delivery.
Right.
All right, so, I mean, you're talking about projects, you're talking about short-term approach to delivery. I'm looking at the basics. Let's come to base. Now, before something takes off, there's a design, isn't it?
Yes.
So in the design, it's like in the lab. You cannot put something out unless you've tested it over and over again.
Yeah.
So from the get-go, looking at the design, which is the most basic stage of it, what are the most, if there are even issues, how could those issues be overlooked in design? Because first of all, if there's a flaw or a tentative or an impending or a flaw waiting to happen, you will see it there. That's number one. And so if we take a look at that, starting from design to construction to maintenance of large-scale infrastructure projects, where do we miss it? Is it that we see that truly there are cracks and we still let these projects go on?
Exactly.
I actually like your line of questioning, and you're asking all of the right questions, right? And when we talked about the short-term nature of projects, right? We deliver, in a lot of cases, projects in silos. And what you rightly pointed out is that the project is not just about that construction of the infrastructure and cutting the ribbon to all of the acclaim. A lot of the work is done prior to that construction and execution work. And when you miss that hard work in that thinking process to do all of your risk assessment, to do all of your stakeholder engagement, to do all of these impact assessments, you come in and hear a project that started execution and, oh, we just found out that we have subsea cables. How much work was done front end to understand all of these exposures? And when you make that assumption that that's been done, you've already started failing as a project. So that front end study, that front end assessment, that project context, that understanding the problem, and very importantly, that engaging the stakeholders, the local people who will be affected by this at that point. Sometimes these people are custodians of the information and knowledge that makes a project successful, right? So what we set up and when we started the Offshore Lab, we were very keen on filling these gaps. We understood the silos that existed, that probably some people did that work front end, but they're not the people who are executing it, right? And most times when that budget is made available, it's mostly made available for that execution and ribbon cutting. Because at that time, it's cheaper not to pay for that sustainability. But the real measure of a project is beyond that concept phase, beyond that execution phase, to the point it starts delivering the benefits to the people you build this project for, right? So if you don't have that sustainability in context and in mind, that you build in that resilience from onset, before you hit site, you're going to face those problems when you go through that maintenance period. So if I have an asset, and the asset says, and I say, this is a 25-year cycle, project life cycle for this, I will be advocating a financing model that ensures I not just deliver this project, but I'm able to have a planned maintenance system that has an adaptive design that is actually resilient to whatever, all of the dynamic changes through the 25 years to that point. And when you have that, then you have all of the monitoring and control mechanisms that ensures that you have the adequate governance, the adequate monitoring, the adequate maintenance through that point. And at the time you integrate a number of projects that we've delivered, we've done this and it's done, and we've actually seen the benefits of it. You integrate those local stakeholders and end users right from the point. Imagine you had people, residents around there, and from the start of the project, you started a capacity building thing. You started training hydrologists, structural engineers, monitors, and you factored them into that project. It is their parents who will get flooded if they live there. It's their livestock, it's their livelihood. The tone of the conversation completely changes.
You get them invested from the start.
They become vested.
So all of those subsets of that sustainability mindset and thinking from that onset, once you miss that out of what you're doing, you are walking into, you're completely walking into
Okay, so this is really interesting because we know sometimes the issues with the local communities, but those are issues that sort of seem created. And even with this short-term approach, oftentimes one of my theories is that our politicians are rushing to be the ones to cut the ribbon and put their names on a plaque that says this was done by so much so that they're not focused on the details. But there was a graphic we had up, and that was from GovSpend, which is a public portal dedicated to tracking federal government spending. And it talked about around 309 million naira that was dispersed for the rehabilitation of this particular dam from 2018 to 2024 in 13 tranches to different companies. That's a conversation. But anyway, the official narrative from the National Emergency Management Agency was that the dam overflowed following heavy rainfall. But the collapse was bound to happen because authorities apparently have been turning a deaf ear to some of the feedback from environmentalists in the region. According to them, there were cracks in the dam's wall and erosion had taken place over the embankment, a result of years of abandonment that had already weakened the structure. Can you see what is
happening?
How do people want to stand against this? There was a man, when I was doing the research yesterday, 5 kids.
All of them,
and his wife.
Yeah, all of them.
He
All of
doesn't
them.
know
Where they are. Yeah.
And the number that Nima has given us, 37, many people are saying that there are many
way
more
than that.
people.
Yeah.
But in setting the tone for that, I want to ask, when we look at how much has been spent on this dam in the past 6 years, what does it tell us about how this project was handled that we can then extrapolate to the handling of projects like this and across Nigeria?
I think the response speaks for itself. To be honest, if you look at what's happened, the response speaks for itself. But one of the things that I caught out from you asking that question that concerned me when I was doing similar to what you did is, what happened there is a function of what report you read, right? And given, if we want to look at this project, or you want to look at this, with from a project context, given where we are today, right? Getting that information right at this point is the building block and foundation to ensuring we don't come back here. If we have this level of opaqueness and obscurity to that data, we can't build the knowledge base that will enable us to guide future projects and make this not happen. So whether there was a structural defect, whether it overflew, whether it was, we had density of it, whatever it is, unveiling that to understand the exact nature of this problem is the starting point to finding a solution to that problem. So if we don't have correct data, accurate information on what these problems really are, we have a minimal fighting chance to actually creating solutions for them. So from that point of view, you have that on the one hand, and then on the other hand, I think it's really down to getting the basics right. The second part of your question.
I was wondering, because I looked at the report. They said they had been allocating money for the maintenance of these dams.
And in fact,
so who should be held accountable?
That is exactly where we're going, because there is a culture of mismanagement, a culture of not taking accountability. People are not held responsible when things like this happen. I mean, it's been how many weeks since this happened? No one has been brought to book. And that's the way things go in this country. No one is going to be brought to book. It's just going to pass. So there is a real cost to corruption. And I think when we talk about corruption, it's a very vague concept. We think, oh, people are stealing money, but there's a real cost to it. And this is one of them. How is it that with infrastructural projects in Nigeria, one, there's no accountability. No one is held responsible. Aren't people assigned these jobs at the beginning? Is there no governing body? Is there nothing that can be done to make sure when money goes out, it is used for what it was sent out for? Why isn't that happening?
So let's take a break before Emeka gets into that, because there's a corruption conversation to this, and then also an accountability conversation.
Absolutely.
But we'll look further into that as we look at Nigeria's infrastructural project failures and the conversation around the dam collapse in Maiduguri. Do stay with us. You're still watching Jasiri, and our focus today is on Nigeria's recurring, that's the word here, the recurring infrastructure projects failure. Our guest is Emeka Obiwulu. He's the founder and CEO of the Offshore Lab. Now, Emeka, before we went for the break, Annie was asking about the the cost of corruption. And we've seen the cost here with 37 plus lives, 400,000 people displaced, over 1 million people affected. Reports are that there was reports by the people who live close to the dam days before the dam actually collapsed, but the government is still holding on to it being climate change related. But she asked a very pertinent question in terms of what does corruption cost us when it comes to failures in our infrastructure projects. And then she also asked about accountability. And lack of accountability in these failures. You'll do a road, the first rainy season, you see
It falls apart, and it just stays like that for a few years till the next person comes in.
My personal theory is that we have such a low standard because you continually need to give people contracted employees. It's my personal theory. I could be wrong, but we have inferior standards. We have inferior projects, and then within years you're hearing that we need to spend this much money to get these projects rehabilitated. So let's talk about that.
So different projects, they have their own personalities. Different projects have different stakeholders. Different projects have different implementation strategies as well. So in as much as a bulk of the projects we have who experience these failures, there are some projects that actually do succeed.
Okay.
And from our experience at the Offshore Lab, the projects that we have had the most success with implementing were projects that actually had cross-sector collaboration, right? Where responsibilities were actually shared based on the strengths of private sector, public sector, stakeholder community, etc., and built along that. So if you take the Arrival E-Wing of the Murtala Mohammed that we did last year, end of the last year, that was sponsored by NNPC Shell, but it was actually a project for National Immigration Services and FAN, to get that place completely overhauled. So all of the procedures, the processes, the procurement, the sourcing, and all of that went through the systems of the private sector sponsor, right? While the enabling environment, the policies, and the oversight was provided by someone else, And then you had the stakeholders that you had. And the number of times we've actually enshrined that into projects and having that cross-sector collaboration, we've seen a higher success rate than when you actually have almost like getting an individual to be the prosecutor, the judge, the jury,
the financier, the receiver of the finances.
And you automatically start putting pressure on that individual if you do that, if you go down there. So when you talk about going back to that basics of enshrining sustainability right from the onset of projects, these are the factors you look at. You look at the social factors, the environmental factors, the economic factors, which includes corruption that we're talking about. So if we don't at that planning stage sit down and have this honest conversation, how do we ensure that we build guardrails to make sure that in the next 10 years, if there's change of government, if there's new sets of people, if there are different interests, that this project is protected. If we don't do that, then we're exposing the project to that happening.
Right. Emeka, every time I'm faced with infrastructural decay or devastation, I am wondering that, are we not moving at the pace of the world? Because for me, are there no specific technologies, innovations, as we speak now, that ensure durability and efficiency of projects? I still go about the road and I still see manual fixing of roads.
Manual labor.
When I've gone to Dubai, I would not lie to you, I've seen a trailer that goes from here to there.
Road
and one
across the road,
it's tarred, another sweep,
and it's done.
It's sanded, another one, it's graded.
Yes.
But I'm still seeing
In
manual
Nigeria, you
people
still have them with the hose and things.
Pans with cement and stuff in it.
And then people
and they
spend 7 hours
arrange
in
it.
traffic because of that.
I just want to know what we can do.
Without the accountability. So the project you talk about, there's progress, there's activity happening there. I've had some very bad experiences. The one that stands out the most to me. I went to a school for special needs kids in the Niger Delta, right? And they wanted to get some social impact projects done there. We went to visit a lab for an ICT lab. Was supposed to have been built by the State Education Board for deaf kids. And it was very, very, very motivated. And I went in there, and after rigmarole, got the place open, and walked in, and trust me, it was very well equipped, real machines, computing systems, CPUs, very well air-conditioned, very well furnished, very well set up. There was a VSAT system outside. And for the 2.5 years it was built, no one had ever used anything in there.
Oh, gosh.
It's for decoration.
Wow.
It's for
Decoration.
I told you, it's for ribbon cutting.
Wow.
I hear you. I hear you, but when I look at the investment in the equipment, because I actually went through all of the systems there and all the
audited
equipment in
them.
there, and they were all
Top notch. Top notch.
And what hurts me the most, I mean, in terms of value, it's not a very big project, but what hurt me the most was the demographic it was supposed to serve.
A very targeted,
These were
specific,
special needs
marginalized
kids.
demographic.
And I was thinking about what value would have added for them in 2 years.
So I'm just...
So in that case, these people had a sponsorship to deliver a project. And the budget that was provided for that was to build that infrastructure and cut the ribbon.
And that was it.
And the school couldn't afford to pay the specialized
maintain it.
teachers.
Because I was just about to ask you, why didn't it get used?
To use the facility. So there was
Specialized
no
teachers,
conversation front end to discuss that
Anything after the
sustainability.
ribbon
What
cutting.
happens after we cut the ribbon and the press gun, everyone cut?
Yeah.
What happens to how do we? And at that time, if you're not focused on doing that, the beneficiary themselves will convince you they can bring it on, just bring the project.
Yeah.
It is when you actually put that to the stress test at that inception phase and say, I want to see the detail of how this will be done. And if we need to look for a project financing model at that stage that caters for that, and building a planned maintenance system or delivery system that caters for that element of it, that's the point, that time, at that point, that beginning.
So
I can't overemphasize how much work needs to be done before you go to site.
So you're saying that there are mechanisms that can be put in place? Okay, so my question is this.
Frameworks, mechanisms, strategies, definitely.
Then why aren't they? That's my simple question. Why aren't they? And who is going to make sure that it happens? Because like you said, we can talk and go away and be back next year and we're talking again. So it's not enough to know that these things need to be done. The question is, why aren't they being done? And how are we going to make sure that they are done? So is this something that the government has to do? Is this something that the private sector? Who is going to enforce these mechanisms to make sure that these provisions are made right from the beginning?
If not, it's going to be just
It's just a cycle.
Absolutely, it'll keep happening.
Yeah.
And you know, so while I was walking in, I was admiring a lot of your artwork outside, and there was this writing there that said, if you don't like someone else's story, write your own. You know, so I really like that, quite profound. I think it applies a bit to what you're saying here, and actually why we set up as a company. You know, coming in to say, projects fail, we don't like how projects are delivered. Well, let's actually go and say, if you bring us in, like you normally do, to come in and execute this, let's have a conversation about the deficiency of coming in and working in this silo.
Right.
Let's actually explain why we talk about projects being end-to-end. So we come in and say, we deliver projects end-to-end because it is important that that value that's defined after project execution is understood here.
Right.
And you have a knowledge transfer mechanism that moves from that conceptual phase, implementation and execution to benefits actualization.
Gotcha.
Right? So using that example, when we have our partnerships with government and private sector and companies, we go in and insist we want to start that conversation. If you have done the front end, we want to go back and
redo it.
Wow.
Brilliant.
So all of the projects we've done, you know, we've done work for.
But in saying that, have you met resistance?
Yeah.
Because my next question was going to actually be, we hear the story all the time of mobilization fee. Maybe a project is 500 million. At the end of the day, the actual value of the project might be 250 because people have taken here and there. Without naming any names, not putting you under the spotlight. What resistance have you encountered? And it can also be just you. Anybody who's working in this project space, especially with government.
Human beings aren't the best at change.
No, not at all.
Right? It's very difficult. So to ensuring change, to even kickstart the process, you know, you have to understand context, understand the environment, and then make the necessary sacrifices to get to the point. So we didn't start from the day one. When we delivered our initial projects, we just came in at that point of project execution. And sometimes when we did some of those benefit actualization, we had to demonstrate, we had teeth in the game to demonstrate that there was value in this. And because of some of the organizations we worked with were very professional organizations. We were able to go back with a template of how when you deliver this project and you walk away, your brand is at risk. Because your brand is standing there and everywhere is leaking, everything. And everybody who walks across it says, these people did this. So we can go back and then say, but when we came back to the second project, this is what we did. This is actually what happened. This is how you got that brand value by having this maintenance put in place, this put in place. And when you speak to accountable organizations who have that sort of framework and that sort of DNA, it makes sense to them.
It resonates.
It resonates, I'm sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
So that first step of understanding that, making the sacrifice, then the second step, they bring you to, okay, let's see how this works. Let's see if we can look from that conceptualization phase and implementation phase. And it's worked for us so far in that context. You know, whether we still have a wider national problem away from what we're doing there, absolutely. There's no ambiguity at all to that.
You know, even when, let's even leave the semantics of this, because sometimes some of these things are good on paper, but it depends on who is giving you the project to do. And most of the projects I've seen in Nigeria, they give it in tranches. And it's not, they will rather, hardly do I find people that do end-to-end. Before the beginning and the end, there are like 20 companies. So the end-to-end desire is still like a utopia situation. Let's even talk about something that we cannot even that we don't have power.
Well, let's pause that because this conversation is taking us to the end. I know she's getting to the climate change conversation, but there's much more. We'll also talk about public-private partnerships. That's a very big conversation when it comes to infrastructure challenges in Nigeria. The conversation continues after this. Behind the scenes, I think we've even in some ways shocked Emeka a little bit here. But I love the important nature of this conversation, and I'm very sure that those who are watching also realize it, because it's not just about the collapse of the dam in Maiduguri. This is about bridges, it's about schools, it's about hospitals, it's about housing, public housing, it's about so much, and how we look at how projects are done in Nigeria. Before the break, Lola was asking about climate change, which is very important.
Very, very important, you know, that we touch on the complications that climate change can bring and the increasing environmental risks that prevents, you know, when it comes to project costs and sustainability, because I know that when projects come, we have to think of the climate because some of this infrastructure are under the atmosphere, the weather, the sun, the wind, they're susceptible to a lot of things. What are some of the critical design principles that we need to apply to ensure that infrastructure in Nigeria is resilient? Because I have seen innovation. Trust me. I don't know where. I know somewhere in Japan. I've seen a road that is solar. They are walking and driving on it, and at the same time,
many of the systems are powered.
But in Nigeria, we're even looking at what do we need to do. Some of these projects that are collapsing, it might even be a soil issue. That from ab initio, they shouldn't have even situated
They shouldn't have sand-filled that area or built things on it.
Of this magnitude is supposed to exist. So, you are the professional here.
Make it make
Honestly,
sense.
make it make sense because, well, I'm not even, it's not, we already know it doesn't make sense. But we're discussing an utopia situation where everything is normal. What do we need to do? Because these things need to be factored in. I even hear that time makes some of these like bridges
They
expand.
Yeah, they expand,
And those are environmental factors. So what do we need to do to make sure that these are part of the things you include in the planning?
I like your mentioning of utopia. So,
So this is completely hypothetical.
It is hypothetical.
No, exactly. Otherwise, you just get stuck in a bit of whataboutism, like, you know, these people don't do this. So if you look from the basis that there is the will to deliver a sustainable project, for starters, as the basis, right? We have to move away from this mindset of build and abandon. Completely.
B and B.
We have to move away from, and like you said, the politician will look at, if I have 5 naira, they can build me 5 roads. I will invest in 5 roads, and everyone says, I made build 5 roads. If it's going to cost me 2 naira to do maintenance, well, nobody sees that, you know, and I end up building just 2.5 roads or 2 roads or something, you know. But when that mindset completely moves from just going back to the basics from we're building and abandoning, but we're actually building, maintaining, and sustaining. We are not bereft of policies and technology.
That's all. In fact, that's
Nigeria has some of the best
we have so
policies
many
and
policies.
laws.
We have some of the best minds,
Yes.
and we have
Yes.
some of the best policies. Of
Yes.
people. We're not bereft of them.
Just need to implement them.
It's the basics, the fundamentals. All of these things are offshoots of actually going in and accepting that we've moved away from this and we're actually building and implementing sustainable projects, right? From when you now look into the detail of it, by 1,001 things, you have advanced predictive analysis systems that give you, if you talk about the flooding as well, that gather historical data and predict trends.
Yes.
Rainfall trends, flooding trends. You have all that information. Actually, in this case, there was our hydrological agency forecast for 2024, 31 states at risk of flooding.
True.
So even Borno State was mentioned in there. So we had that information, and we had somebody. You said today that some people, some communities were asked to move. Everyone.
Days before.
So it's not.
The information is not the problem. Yeah, the policies aren't the problem.
It's that will and that discipline to actually go in and move away from that mindset. Once you go into that mindset of embracing that sustainable implementation, and the second phase of it, the benefits actualization, where you're monitoring, you have your governance system, you have your maintenance system, and you have your management system in place. All of those additional things that seem like magic but are so basic in every other clime fits into that system.
You know what you just said? There's this, it's not a quote, but it's a saying, and I love it so much. The willingness to do far outweighs the capability to do. And I think we said it some other time on this show. People think what's important is having the skill, getting the knowledge, like you said, the policies. But no, capability is actually useless without willingness to apply it. So if you have someone that's willing and incapable, you can teach them. They can learn. They can adapt. So my little 2 cents here is that I think Nigerians need to foster our will again, our willingness to see something better, because I think that's draining out of us slowly but surely, and it's showing in our system.
So before we wrap up, we have to talk about PPP.
Yes, we do.
I'm asking
It's a difference, so we hear it, whether it's at the federal, it's at the states, even local governments are doing PPPs. And we know that Nigeria's infrastructure gap is about 2.3 trillion naira just to fill Nigeria's infrastructure gap. But we also have a population that's growing incredibly fast, and the projections right now are 229 million Nigerians based on World Bank data. What role should the private sector play? And I ask that with all temerity, with all understanding that even the private sector can be corrupt. And we have such a system in Nigeria that as much as you want to go in clean, it's even
You're gonna come out dirty.
No, it's even the system that will keep you that will
the system
corrupt
make sure that you
but it
don't
also
do it
feels
clean.
oftentimes we've seen governments start to, and I say this a lot, start to abdicate part of its responsibility to the private sector.
Yes.
Is it the private sector that's meant to build a bridge? Is it the private sector that's
meant to fix the roads
or fix a road? So what is the ideal sort of relationship, this symbiotic relationship that should be had between the government and the private sector when it comes to infrastructure projects?
If it can be had, if it can be had, and if there are, budding challenges that can come out of that.
I think it should be had.
Yeah.
I'm a very big fan of cross-sector collaboration, very big fan. And most of the projects that we have that have succeeded are function of cross-sector collaboration. Most recently, I don't know if you saw what they've done at the National Theatre,
Okay, with the bankers group.
Yes.
Yes.
And these initiatives, some of them get born from the public sector, and people sit down and look at frameworks they can actually build to incentivize relevant parts of the private sector who have track records for delivering such projects and bring them on board, who have the will to do it as well. So you ask, should private sector build, roads and bridges? We have a problem, our unique problem that we understand. That's probably not same with every other clime, and we have to find our own solutions to our own problems.
Yes.
We have seen very robust roads built as a function of tax breaks given to private sector organizations. And we ask ourselves, should they be doing that? Of course they should. If you give them the right incentive and they actually deliver how we want them to deliver,
Then
what's
job
the,
done.
What's the problem?
Yeah, job done.
So everyone has a role to play, and we have to honestly look at ourselves, our problems, and prefer our own solution, given our own unique dynamics.
Yeah.
You know, and in that sense, the stakeholders, the end users, the local people, the private sector, and the public sector all have a role to play. But having that competent private sector entity that part of its existence is dependent on high levels of accountability to shareholders and to capital, you build that resilience, that sustainability resilience, by already embedding that project and protecting it in that way. So all their systems and structures are, by default, lent to that project that gives it a better fighting chance to succeed than where you have just a single entity playing all of these roles, reducing its ability to perform each of these roles because of potential conflict of interest.
Wow.
Oh, okay, well, that was...
I feel like in a way we just had a master class.
yeah.
I wish we could record
That's the
this.
booster
Honestly,
out of the
send
storm.
a clip of this to the politics.
You know how I'm looking
Leadership
for the young.
This is
Yeah,
a
just,
young
can you just watch
Nigerian.
this?
What
Can you
you're
just watch
saying
this?
makes
Watch
sense.
this.
So what's the problem? Everything he's saying.
Why is it so difficult?
Où est le problème? Pourquoi ça c'est si difficile?
So before Kat starts,
And she enters epic now.
exactly, our time is fast spent. Thank you so much, Mr. Obiwulu, for spending this time with us. Very insightful conversation, very just brilliant insights, and I really hope, fingers crossed, knock on wood or glass in this case, that the government and the people who need to hear this, hear it. Please listen and take this feedback on board. If we are good, guess what? You guys are going to be good as well. So that's just my little charge to the government. Thank you so much for coming to the studio with us today.
I did enjoy
All right, it is time for us to sign off. It has been another great episode of Tasiri. Thank you to everyone who's watched. Thank you for joining us.
Do you know you cannot rush Annie? They are going to rush us out of this.
We're going to be back again tomorrow at 10 a.m. See you there.
Bye-bye.
I rushed.